Okay, so this session 3 in this Lumos Learning series about helping administrators and educators become as fully informed on distance learning issues and practices. And today we're going to sort of combine a lot of material that we've looked at in the last 2 sessions where we focused on curriculum and technology, and we're going to look at it a little bit, wrap it all up a little bit and talk about it from the administrator's point of view. So the program goals, just to show them again, is we're talking about the fundamentals of supporting technology. We will talk more, and we've already talked quite a bit about curriculum issues and strategies, the challenges of distance learning, which I think is going to be the major subject for today, the importance of organizational structure and staff training, be a big focus for next week, socio-emotional support for everyone who's involved in this process and everyone who's stuck at home, but certainly for everyone who's involved in education using these technologies, and focus solution proposals and participants for your situations. We're going to talk a bunch about that today, and we'll talk about it more in subsequent sessions. So just to review our sort of clock chart of the entire system, this entire thing is the distance learning system, universe, ecosystem, whatever you'd like to call it. And we can start up here. There are the learning systems. This is the learning management systems, digital learning, digital assistants, professional development programs. This is like Google Classroom is up here. The delivery systems, the classroom management systems for keeping track of things like attendance and managing the classroom. And in fact, something like what we're doing here, the using Zoom for a group session. And then we have instructional and curriculum systems. So this is instructional design tools, curriculum management. This is like iReady or Lumos Learning. Management systems, this is everything that keeps track of it from an administrator, a teacher's point of view, the communication systems for the administrators and teachers communicating with each other, communicating with students, communicating with parents. And then up here, we spent time last class, I think, talking about security is an extremely important issue, hardware systems, network and connectivity issues, which of course becomes a huge issue for those students and families with poor systems. So with poor connectivity. So anyway, this is the universe. We've sort of covered all aspects of this. We're going to go back and delve into more, but from here on, we're going to be talking about the integration of these issues to create strategies and to solve problems for managers. So those of you who were here last week will remember this slide where we talked about setting priority standards. And I'm going to hand it over to Mukunda to go through this slide and the next slide to just review this actually in a little bit more detail than we did last time. So Mukunda, whenever you're ready.
Thanks. So in session 2, Professor Rogoff highlighted that you have a lot less time for instruction in the context of distance learning. And he also discussed some of the strategies on how to condense and sharpen the focus of your curriculum plan without compromising on the critical standards. So specifically, we discussed how the coherency map is a helpful tool in this context. So as you can see in the picture here, just a quick recap. If you look to the left of the standard that you are observing, you can identify the foundational standards. And why is that important? Because knowing what those standards are helps you do the, address the summer learning loss or the COVID loss. And looking to the right of the standard, that tells you that the standards that are going to come in the future, so that are dependent on the mastery of 3.nf.a.1. So as I was thinking about this and the prioritization, it occurred to me that, if we had a comprehensive list of standards by grade and subject, that would really help drive the coherency-based priority rank, right? So thanks to my amazing R&D team, they actually whipped up a report that I think is very cool and useful. So let me quickly show you. Professor, if you could click on the link and let's go to the website. I just click on that image or the link, which is the URL. Yeah, excellent. And so when you first open this page, it asks you to select your state. One second, no. If you could go back and refresh the page, let's select the state, because the standards would be hit refresh. It'll ask the excellent. So you can select, say, Florida, the sunny state, and then select user type as a teacher or school leader. It will be the same. Save. Excellent, thank you. And now if you could scroll down, you can also close that cookie policy message if it's coming in the way. It's at the bottom. Great. So as you can see at the top, it gives you buttons to select grade and subject. So let's go ahead and select Professor Rogoff, the 4th grade, say math. If you scroll up, just scroll up so that you see the buttons at the top.
Sorry, this one, 4G A1?
No, go up. You need to scroll up using the scroll bar. There you go.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and then select math. Perfect. So what it's showing you now is a list of standards for 4th grade math, and it is showing the Florida standard. So if you selected instead California, you're going to see the Common Core standards. And it also groups them by different domains. And you can also look up the definition of each of these standards that's available readily for you. So if you could scroll down a little bit, as you can see here, let's stay on this for a second. I can quickly tell that MAFS.4.MD.1.1 has 2 foundational standards and 1 dependent standard, right? So now if you look at, for example, the one below that, which is MD.1.2, it tells me that that's a very important standard, because that is going to be foundational to a number of things that the students would learn when they graduate to 5th grade. So definitely, if I had to come up with some kind of a priority, and this chart helps me quickly tell that, oh, MD.1.2 is a high priority standard. So we need to cover that adequately. So it's very simple, easy to use, and it helps you plan your curriculum. So the link to this is available in the PowerPoint, and also we'll place that link in this chat so you can explore and share your feedback. And so that's really all I wanted to share about this new, simple, exciting report. Professor Rogoff, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me say, in speaking to people and in thinking about this, I thought so many of the issues that you as administrators, as principals, as managers are dealing with really falls under the rubric of what's called resource-based strategic analysis. And what does this mean? It really means that you start off with fundamental restrictions on resources that are very hard to change, right? So, you can't change your budget that easily. You can't magically hire 30 new teachers. You've got to deal with constraints that are rigid. And that dictates a certain kind of thought process and strategy planning process, which is, quite well known. And so these are the 4 steps involved in this. And I think you'll see that when we're going to be speaking, we're inviting everybody to participate, but we have Dr. Pedersen and Dr. Perry, who are going to be, speaking first. You'll see that a lot of the issues that we're all dealing with in this world fall into this heading. So first, you need to identify the resources that you have. You need to define your capabilities. So you need to honestly think about, what are my strengths and weaknesses? What do I do the best, and what am I really suffering with not being able to do well? So, technology may be your strength, or having strong, very personally connected teachers with your students is your strength. And your weakness might be that your class size is large, or that your technology in certain areas is weak. Based on those 2 things, what resources do I have, and what are my fundamental capabilities, strengths, and weaknesses, create a strategy that works within those constraints. Then you can identify resource gaps and some possible actions to fill them. Of course, this has to be something that you can do over time, because you're not going to solve all your problems right away. You're not going to get tons of new resources immediately. But this may be where you think about, well, I need to make an appeal to the district. I need to go to the legislature. I need to go to the PTA, and I can fill a few of these key gaps. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of lay that out for people as a way to think about this as you struggle with your constrained resources as you try to figure out what's next. So, Dr. Pedersen, thank you very much. I see you joined the meeting, which I'm very happy about. I interviewed Dr. Pedersen for the white paper that we did, and it's posted on the Lumos website. He has a very interesting school, and he's a very accomplished and thoughtful administrator. So I'm going to ask you to share with us, tell everyone, all the participants, what your situation is, and what your school does, and how you managed through a lot of that during the first move to online education, maybe on your way to the second one.
Yep. So you were right about everything except for it's pronounced Peterson. My grandfather would be upset if I didn't correct that.
Oh, okay. No, he's the priority. Okay.
Well, rest his soul, but yes, he would have let me get away with that. So thank you, everyone. And I would thank you for. We had a very, very interesting conversation, and I think even as we were having the conversation, even articulating some of the things, I didn't realize it until you started asking questions about kind of like almost metacognitive about what we actually did. I think not to be cliche, but I think that the best advice I think all of us would have and would agree is that old proverb of you don't dig a well when you're thirsty. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And because we were in a position, I'm the superintendent of 3 schools in their technical high schools. We have 2,300 students. We were very fortunate because we had already laid a lot of the groundwork for online learning, adding some components to that, one-to-one devices for every student, and then requiring all of our teachers to have some online component as well. So that initial transition from which we call like emergency remote transition was bumpy, but in hearing and listening to some of my other colleagues around the state as well, my county, state, and beyond, was that it wasn't as bumpy as some others. And of course, we do have the luxury of having all high school students, which changes that, just changes some of the difficulty levels of it as well. So, but we were fortunate, and I think the first thing we did was we thought it was only going to be 2 weeks. So we just mimicked the schedule that we had during the day, and then quickly learned that did not work. And that was a disaster because you couldn't replicate those 45 minutes or even double period classes. It just, when you're looking at online learning, it's supposed to be flexible for reasons, and you're supposed to work at it and use curriculum and develop the curriculum for it differently. So once we realized that, we really hit our stride about 3 weeks in when we got together another schedule that, with the support of the teachers and input from the teachers and the students, that was something a little bit more that allowed the students to see their teachers on a regular basis, but also had a lot of that time to do individual projects. So it was something that you would see more in colleges, so that there's check-in times, but there was also a lot of independent work done as well. And I think the other thing that was crucial was communication. So we didn't know what the future held, and actually today we still don't, or at least in my state, we're still not sure about what's going to happen, depending on what news site or website you go to. But even during this summer, I'm still meeting with my teachers and administrators on a weekly basis, letting them know I still don't know exactly what it looks like, but here are some of the things that we're talking about. And I think that transparency of just like, here are my thoughts, tell me what I'm missing. And we sent out just a tentative schedule of what we think September would look like for us, even though we know that it's constantly changing. At least they see that occurring, and they've had their input, and we've kind of vetted it through the teachers, the unions, the students, the parents, even members of the community. So we're in as good a place, I think, as anybody could be now. And one of the last things we did was we really tried to up our game when it came to preparing for this year. So we really want to make sure that the emergency remote learning was one thing, but now the expectations are going to be much higher. We really just took what we were doing in the classrooms and we tried to transition it to online. Now, knowing that there's a good chance that, so we're looking at it from 2 different ways. Whereas before, our primary was physical instruction that we had to supplement with the virtual. We're looking at it the other way now, where we're really going to have base our virtual learning and supplement it with physical face-to-face interactions, whether that's once a week, whether that doesn't start until October, whether that adds on or whatever the case is, but having that flexibility. That I've covered it, Edward, or?
So let me ask you a couple of questions, and then we'll see if others have questions as well. So, I laid out this thing, well, you need to accept the fact that you've got constrained resources. If you had no constraints, if you had, millions of dollars sitting in your account that you could spend on learning related tools and people and other things, what do you think, how would you spend it? If the constraints came off, what would you do?
That's so funny to tell a public school educator that who's been always strapped for money. What would you do? I think what I would do is, the first thing is to decrease the digital divide, is ensure that internet is accessible to 100% of the students. So that has to be that, and that every student has a device. So those were 2 things. We were fortunate. We were, and then some of the local cable companies allowed for free Wi-Fi. So that was good. I think, though, as a legislator, I think that in times of those situations, I think that I would advocate that communities require that from their cable companies or cellular companies, that, hey, for students, there has to be hotspots. We're preparing right now because when we did our follow-up, we realized that there's about 10% of our students who don't have access to any kind of cable or Wi-Fi. And we are looking to purchase things that it's costly to do that. The other, what we also learned too is that some students told us they were able to do some of their assignments, but they were doing it on their phones. So the other thing is, I think that there is a need for additional tutoring one-to-one when you're doing remote learning, so that this way there's additional time. So even if there were, once again, if you gave me the blank check, so I'm going for it here. So if a teacher had like a college level where you have a teacher assistant or professor's assistant, a TA or one or two TAs. So in our world, it could be, paraprofessional or two paraprofessionals to assist with the homework overnight, even though it's supposed to be done individually, just to provide that assistance. I would do that. Also, I would provide some additional training for parents on how to help them. This was really hard. This was really hard because they didn't know, and when you're changing things, parents don't know even where do they go for help. So for those kind of things, I think just to provide that further infrastructure, we made an assumption that our teachers had all their devices. We had to provide them with updated devices. We even had one teacher who didn't have internet. So we had to make sure that was addressed as well. So we had to work out that problem as well. So I think those things, but I think in some cases, there needs to be additional time and additional resources for students, because that flipped learning is a great idea, and when it works fantastic. But if there's no other resource that they have, like just a opportunity for someone to assist them with it, and teachers can't be there at 8 o'clock at night to do all this, so that would be beneficial, so that you have another crew maybe ready after hours.
Yeah. Did you have any teachers who just flamed out on being able to use online tools?
Yes, there were some. We were able to maintain to keep it going, and we had our supervisors would then sometimes come in and do an assist, and they would do some team teaching, and that was very beneficial. But for some, as we said, we had prepared we required every teacher to have some online learning. But in certain areas, like English, we had one of my teachers who he submits things to online platforms and for model lessons. So he was already looking to the next level. But we had other areas and subjects like, how do you do that for welding? How do you do that for cosmetology? Or even phys ed, how do you do that? So those were harder, and we struggled creatively just trying to make sure that we had something going on up until the bitter end.
Yeah. I'll say this. I think one of the limitations, I should say, of training is that you don't really learn this stuff until you use it. So
Right.
you can do the training, so you can do the training, in the summer. 3 months later, when you actually have to turn on the computer, it's all new to you, and you've not really used it, and you've not thought about it, and you're sort of, you're climbing the learning curve again, and so what's the answer for that? I mean, the fact that a lot of teachers are going to forget what the tools are, they're going to stop being comfortable with them. Is there an ongoing mentoring? Was the training something that they could access whenever they needed it?
Yeah, we changed our models, and I think everything you said, the answer is yes, yes, yes. I think we have the constant training, and if not, we slip back to where remote learning becomes the new version of dittos. Which is just a fancy ditto. It's a fancy ditto, so that to do this, you know, do the presentation, do, you know, and it's just a variation of what we did, you know, what, you know, we got away from the 80s and the 90s. So I think there's a lot of, I think for some teachers, it may also be harder for them. And you know, I pause just because this isn't true for everyone, but I think because a lot of them, or some could be in such an analog mode that their creativity stops in the analog fashion. So, you know, I'm thinking back to when I was an English teacher and we would cut apart poetry to see just by the lines to see how it fits. And it was an actual tactile, you cut out and to see rhyme schemes. Maybe there could be some teachers that don't understand that there is a digital equivalent to that. You know, or, you know, where teachers who would have done real scavenger hunts don't realize that you can do digital scavenger hunts as well. So I think that, so if I could somehow figure out how we could help the divide or that to translate that, that would be beneficial.
Yeah, yeah. So Jan Perry posted a comment in chat, and we're going to talk to her more in a minute. But she posted a comment saying, you know, there's a huge number of tutorials available on YouTube and Google, which is absolutely true, and many of them are quite excellent.
Yeah.
You know, I'd have to say my experience with teachers who are, you know, sort of not comfortable with the technology is they're not even comfortable with YouTube, and they're not, you know, they really need to have a person. They're just in a mode of being taught by people, not by watching videos.
Sure.
Although, you know, the videos are great. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting you say that because there really is no excuse not to learn anything. I mean, you could learn how to change oil in a car, you know, sewing or anything like that. And I think maybe as I'm listening to you, you know, when we're providing teacher professional development, maybe the fun thing is go to YouTube and learn something non-education, you know, whatever, how to make a flower pot, how to, whatever the case is. Because do you remember for educators, I think they regardless of whatever you taught, they taught you in teacher college, you usually started teaching the same way your favorite teacher taught you. Like that was your default. That was your default was like, you know, mine was Mr. Dello and Mr. Ritchie. So even though they taught me all these things, I went back to being just those guys, and I was trying to mimic them. And I think because they were never taught anything that way, their default is, well, show me the textbook on YouTube and I'll read it and I'll figure out how to, and I'm making kind of a little bit of a joke, but I think that's part of the issue is just that once again, that transition, because that's not how many people, and many of us have learned from that.
Yeah, it's true. I have a friend who changed the engine on his car, and I said, how did you learn how to do that? He said, no, I didn't know how to do it. I just followed a YouTube video. He took the engine out of his car and he put a new one in, and that's.
Well, think about Bloom's taxonomy, where that even though that guy who did that, your friend was great, but the guy who actually filmed the video was even, I'm sure it's even higher level of Bloom's.
That's right.
The fact that you have to produce something and you're actually producing this video and breaking it down for somebody else who doesn't know, I mean, that's real learning right there.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We'll come back in a second.